Ah.
Seriously, why are we? That's such ideas of how it's a benefit for all of us. In fact, why don't we go through those videos? Can we explore them and not see us?
Okay, what am I doing?
That's part of work too, right? You
Yeah,
get
it's just
past
like,
that comfortable, you have to stretch yourself,
Okay, Abby Dyck.
There, we're all here. Hey!
Hey, we're all there.
Hey! There we go.
Excellent. Well, well, look at that. We've got. All right. You can see us, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So.
Perfect.
And actually, yeah. Here, let's pull this chair out of here.
I would much rather look at them than figure out.
All right. Just shift over one. Yeah.
There we go.
Woohoo!
Oh, you're good.
Pet peeve of mine. Okay, we have Mr. Wright has left, and he's at Kalama doing the athletic director job there. And we have.
Them instead of us.
What's that?
Can we look at them instead of us?
Fine. So we're gonna do introductions here. So we have Mike is. I don't know what you can see here. Yeah, Mike's raising his hand. He is now the media teacher next door, working with CNS and many other things, photo, video, and robotics. And then we have a teacher from Jefferson, John, and then we have Sam and Michelle and Tim and Eric. And so you know some of us. Oh, and Jay is right off camera here. I hear you. So the agenda that I sent you, essentially what I want to do is stick to our timeline of being done by 7, but gather insights from you about what you found at your schools and things that we want to put in part here. And I'm doing a screencast of this, so I'm recording that. And Aaron, you and I had talked earlier, and I have my notes from when we talked in the spring, and that was really helpful.
Scott, real
Yeah.
quick, could we hear what their majors are and what year they are in school?
Yeah. So now that we're done here, I thought we'll go with Aaron, Abby, and Jenna in that order because we see it on our screen. If you want to do a little introduction, what you're up to, and so on, we'll go through that next.
So my name is Aaron Field. I am a BFA film major at the New York Film Academy in Burbank, California. And I'm on my going into my 6th semester right now, so about a year and a half in.
Excellent. Abby?
I am Abby Dyck. I am a screenwriting major at Azusa Pacific University, about 20 miles outside of LA, and this is my freshman year.
Awesome. Thank you. Jenna?
My name is Jenna Cusak. I am a BFA film major. Most likely I will concentrate in producing and post-production, sound design, and editing, but that's not actually established until second year. And I go to University of North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Awesome. So I think what I'd like to do is we'll just maybe go in that same order of things that you would think would be most helpful for a class here. And we'll just kind of go through the cycle a few times.
Yeah, I guess someone's having fun. I guess I'll start. As I mentioned before, talking to Mr. Duke, I think like the best things that I got out of the classes that we have aren't even necessarily like the things directed towards specifically film or specifically cinematography or screenwriting, but the just work ethic skills. He has us do blog posts and just making sure that we have deadlines, consistent things that we're keeping our in a workplace environment. It would be our boss, but of course for school it's just our teachers. But having those deadlines and having things that we're consistently turning in, being required to check in, show progress and that kind of thing is so helpful like now, because I know that even I fall into moments where it's like I'm not as disciplined as I want to be with that, but without the time that I had in LeDuc's class doing those things, I have no clue where I'd be, to be completely honest. But that kind of stuff is super helpful. And those kind of skills, and working with other students is major, because high school is a great chance where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of chances to collaborate. So the more you can get students working together, put in positions where they're complementing each other's strengths and they can work collaboratively, that's what I think is 100% the best to focus on.
Cool. Thank you. Abby?
Okay, well, I only just started 2 weeks ago, and the first week here didn't do much, so we haven't really gotten into everything yet, but the one thing that just has stood out to me over and over and over again this the last 2 weeks is the emphasis on story, and that story is everything. And I feel like that's kind of a review thing for me, because I feel like you do a great job of putting an emphasis on that in your class. But I just love how everything that our classes do is tied around that. Whether we're talking about lighting or blocking, they always say, okay, what do I plan on doing for blocking? Well, what's the story? Then you choose the blocking. So like stuff like that. But I would say for your class, like having the same students every single day of the week, that's something that I think you can take advantage of, just to reinforce that idea of story every single day of the week. Because like here, I don't have classes every single day of the week, but that's an opportunity I think that you can really ingrain in your students' heads while you have them 5 days a week, is just like the importance of story.
Cool. Thank you. Jenna, I see you have some notes behind you.
Yeah. Although I can't move the table though, so I also have it on a Google Doc, which I'll just share with you after. I wrote it. It didn't work though. I can't move the table, but you might be able to see some of
I
it.
can see, I can pretty much see all of it.
Yeah. So there's some things that like Capital, some like work ethic things that Capital instilled in me, and specifically your class, as well as just the emphasis on story was super helpful. Fundamentals of like all of the different disciplines that we went through was incredibly helpful when starting classes here. How to effectively work on a team, how to communicate effectively, precisely, and intelligently, whether that was just like using film language in a way that was correct, or just being able to communicate my creative ideas, and also being able to express the creative process I was going through in a way that made the conversation accessible to others, so I could get constructive criticism, or just have a conversation about the planning of a film or the development of an idea. The importance of resolution and like the 3-act structure, because that's something that is often overlooked when people are developing their storytelling skills. And then also this idea of like, you don't fail because you're not good enough, but like if you're gonna fail, it's because you stop trying, and like if you keep trying, you won't fail. And that doesn't mean like you're not gonna have moments that are really hard. It just means that you can continue and you can continue to improve. And I think that was something your class taught me. Some things that I learned here, which I think would be really beneficial in the class, would be deeper understanding of the roles of director, editor, sound designer, which I had prior knowledge, which I think helped. But I think things like editor, there isn't as much of an emphasis on editing. We learn the technical skills, but I think it would be super helpful to like understand the way editing shapes a story and how it is really like the pillar that holds up storytelling. And like we watched The Breakfast Club in my for my editing class this year, and that is a really good movie to show the process of editing, and like you can see in scenes how different the emotional reaction would be if the editing was different. And if you actually have the disc, you can see the different cuts of different scenes and feel that emotion. So that was super helpful. Also, like learning more about professionalism and how you act on set, how you act on a team. That's something that's instilled in every freshman and sophomore at UNCSA, and I think that would be something that would be super helpful in class in high school, because as much as like we try to be professional, just going through that would be helpful. And then also I sent you this document, but like hierarchy on film sets and understanding the different positions, even if we don't have all of them at Capitol, just understanding what they are, and like a unit production manager understanding the importance of roles like that and the limitations of a program and why we don't have those roles. Also accelerated production schedules. Here we have 1 week to film, edit, to write, film, edit, 1 to 3 minute conflict scenes, stuff like that. And it's all done on a phone, so that like it's all about the story, it's silent, stuff like that is super helpful. Because as much as pre-production is important, just understanding the basics of telling a story, and I know we did this in your class, but like telling a story without dialogue really helps students grow. And I've seen that here, and like I've experienced that here as well as in your class. Also, doing pitches more often would be super helpful, because regardless of what your job is in the film industry, chances are you will have to pitch your work. Whether you're a producer or a director or a screenwriter, pitching is super important, and understanding those skills. And I know our HL class did pitch a lot of ideas, but just in general, having that be like a weekly thing, or like every few weeks, that would be helpful. And then this is something that is harder to do, but integration of larger projects. So maybe having a crew of 10 people, and I have this over here, but like a few positions that you could try to bring in would be like having a first AD as well as a director, so first assistant director, and maybe having a production designer who would focus on affinity and contrast instead of having the director do that. Because in the professional world, that as much as the director is involved in that conversation, production designers do kind of take the lead there. Possibly having a DP who isn't the camera operator, so people can learn how to communicate their ideas, creative ideas, and work with others in that manner. Same thing, possibly having a boom operator who's not the mixer, but that's kind of hard with HRMs. Having a unit production manager and a locations manager or scout person would be super helpful. And then also, I know it's not necessary at Capitol, but having people fill out locations paperwork, which I also sent you, would be helpful, because that kind of trains you for when you actually need to do it. Because if you don't, and you're in college or you're filming just in the world outside of high school, you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't have the proper paperwork. And that would be a good, like, safe place to practice those skills. And if you mess up, it's totally fine, because you're filming on Capitol High School grounds. It's not an issue. But yeah, so that would be a thing that like might be helpful for students. And then also, as far as just like the jobs, you could do like flashcards the same way you did with like learning film terms and information about like the French New Wave. It could just be a similar thing where like students just go through flashcards and maybe take like a quiz on it or something, just when they have time. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. But I have just based on what you were just saying with the different roles, I would like to get all three your input on an idea based on the meeting we had last year, talking about the technical and creative, or production side versus the art side. And you were just talking about that, having more roles. What if, okay, normally we have 5 people. We have, director, editor, sound person, screenwriter, and so on. What if for each role we had a technical person and a creative person? So we'd have 10 people on a team. So imagine this. You have, and we can call the roles different things, because I think you just summarized essentially what I'm trying to say, but it makes more sense in an industry standpoint. But we would have the person who's operating the camera, and then we have the affinity contrast person who's talking about how the camera is supposed to speak creatively for the storytelling. So their job is to say shallow depth of field, whereas the person with the camera, who's actually going to set the depth of field, is just doing the technical stuff. The creative person is saying how we're going to use the camera creatively to tell the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the nice thing is you already kind of have, and I think I agree definitely with what Jenna's saying, talking about like when we're working in crews and that kind of thing in school, it's cool to kind of be able to be put in a position where we're doing the roles the way that they're intended to be, not kind of like in a high school way. Because I know I learned a lot of how to do films and stuff online by myself, independent, but I learned how to do a lot of things wrong, and unlearning those habits are kind of tough. But I think it's definitely awesome because there are different kids that will be better on the technical end, kids that are going to be better on the creative end, and you have those roles already existing. Like you can give a more technical kid get his hands on a camera, learn the ins and outs of the DSLRs that are at Capitol, and then the DP working the creative side of that directly with the director who's really carrying the vision of the story. Those roles definitely already exist. So you can, the DP being more creative, talking about how creatively you're going to tell the story, working with the director, finding that story, cam operator, and if you have more of an emphasis on like your lighting team and sound, which are also more on set, at least technical roles, especially like sound comes more creative in post-production than anything. But yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely important though to introduce the roles and introduce those kind of things to students in a similar way that they see them later on, not in a modified high school setting. Just because like learning it correctly early is going to help so much later on. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't believe that like the important thing in these classes is like we got to learn every single feature of like our cameras. We got to learn every single specific of every role because that stuff's online nowadays. You can find it. I love the art side. I love the work ethic side. I love all that, but it's definitely cool to have that jump start and be able to understand what roles are more creative, what roles are more technical. So that way when kids are kind of like trying to get into this medium, they can find the thing that works for them because there's so many different jobs you can do. There's so many cool ways to get into film. There's something like literally for everyone. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, going off of that, I completely agree with Aaron, and I have an outline of like 10 or so roles that basically do what Aaron just said. So there would be a DP as well as a camera operator and the camera operator would also fulfill the role of first assistant, first AC. So like there would be one person who does get to more so plan the creative aspect of like lighting and stuff like that. But if someone is more interested in just the technical side of things, which like people here are and people at Capitol are, it would give them that opportunity. But I don't know if that's necessary for every role. So like director, I guess it could be seen this way, but you can have director and then like first assistant director, which does manage more of the, I guess, logistical side of things. And so that would be a good role for someone. And you could also combine that role as long as we're clear that that's what we're doing with production. But I would also recommend maybe having a producer. That was a role I had not been introduced to until I got here. And it is something that I personally am incredibly interested in. And I think that the productions at Capitol would have been, that I worked on would have been exponentially more organized if we had someone who's dedicated to being the producer. You can also mix that job with unit production manager as long as you were clear that that's what you were doing, which basically means that like that individual would, because they would be the unit production manager, they would run the technical side of the set, make sure that things are flowing as they should be, which would be incredibly helpful, and also kind of teach people the important skill of if you're on set for something, there's the opportunity to step in and help wherever you can and do your job. And there's also a moment where it's like everything seems like it's running smoothly. I can maybe take a step back, but I think that this would teach people to really like step up and step forward and be proactive as a team member and really be able to like step into that side of taking responsibility and stuff like that. And then production designer, I also think would be someone who could focus on affinity and contrast, like I said earlier, and like Aaron said. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Abby, is there anything you wanted to chime in with?
I love that idea. Completely agree with what both Aaron and Jenna were saying. The only thing is, I know we have to keep IB in mind, and IB stick to the 5 rules. So I think that would be a good kind of end of the year project almost. You could even do it twice towards the end of the year, like after all those tests were done. I think that's, definitely something you would want to introduce later on. Just keeping IB in mind. But yeah, I think that's a really, really cool idea.
You brought up bringing that up with IB, and for those here, IB, there's 5 roles, and they've actually, in the new curriculum, they've expanded it out a bit, which is actually pretty cool.
Oh.
Now there's a set designer,
Nice.
and I mean, so there's, and we can actually make our own roles now, so we can add to it.
Oh, that's cool.
Right, so that could be a growth thing for what you're saying here, but that's some place to emerge, which leads right into the next agenda item that I wanted to talk about is setting priorities for this year. And since we have you 3 right here, right now, from again your experience here and things that you've just shared, if we go each person, what do you think would be a priority? And I like to keep it really simple. 1, maybe 2 things that'd be the thing we focus on. If you want to contribute something. And right now we're just gathering information, and then we can process this, and next time we get together can share out some of the things that we focused on. But Aaron, we'll start with you. What would you say is a priority? Could be a priority this year?
You know, it's interesting because there's, I've always been conflicted on it because it's like you can focus a lot. I think the main divide is kind of like, should we focus more on film theory and like understanding film and understanding the art and how to communicate through that, or is it more like understanding production? And they're 2 very different things. It's a thing even in school now that like people like myself and my classmates still aren't sure like what we're lending more time to. But I think the most important thing that I got from the classes here is just focusing on collaboration and how you can integrate, like not even just your visual media classes, but how we can integrate different departments of the school itself even into what you're doing. I think the most success I had at Capital came from being able to integrate what I was doing in my English classes, being able to talk to my teachers and them allowing me to write screenplays that I use for these classes, or working with Miss Cummins in the theater and pulling actors from there and being able to dip my toes in different things. So the more projects that I think that you can allow students to be collaborative and reach out to other people that might not necessarily be there to do directly a film-oriented thing, but you can still like pull from their talents, pull from their skills, whether that be in literature, writing, music, theater, acting. I think that's super important. And the cool thing about film is it's a collaboration of a bunch of different like art styles. It's where everything kind of meets at a cross section, which is what I love about it. So understanding that like it's a multimedia platform, there's so many things that people can contribute and bring in, creating projects that give the opportunity for as much collaboration as possible. But I on that note, I will say through my time at Capital, especially in LeDuc's class, the time we spent on film theory and the time that we spend just studying films, breaking them down, watching things, even though sometimes it's easy to take for granted, like we're just watching a movie in class or that kind of thing, I feel like I got the most out of those times because you start to subconsciously recognize those things in film. You start to subconsciously be able to understand that and do it on your own without even needing to learn the technical side of it. And the funny thing is, I don't know what the experience has been like for Jenna or for Abby so far at their schools, but the technical side is a 100% must-have. You're going to get taught, right? When you go into your college for film school, that kind of thing, they're going to teach you the technical side. But sometimes, and part of it has been at my school, is the film theory, the art behind it, the communication of that language sometimes gets glazed over. So it's really important, I think, that you get these students going into these programs as they pursue like further education after high school, ready to like with those things that they aren't going to learn later on. But yeah.
So if I could summarize real quick before we go to Abby, the collaboration theme this year, and then maybe just keep on the theory piece, knowing that the technical will come down the road, and especially the equipment's going to be different wherever you go, but making sure that they have a good underpinning of how the story is propelled through knowing film theory.
For sure, and I think that it's we spent a lot of time in your class when I was there. We would watch films, talk about them, write blog posts, do our scene breakdowns and that kind of thing. And while I know, like, even there were points where I was like, oh, why are we doing this and that kind of thing, it's the most useful things that I got out of that class. Just understanding that, talking with other students, talking with you, and breaking that down has been awesome.
Cool, thanks. So, Abby, what would be your core thing?
Well, story, which I already talked about. Story is everything. But the second thing I would say is also something you do a good job at bringing up, but just showing, not telling, which is also something that they've been talking about a lot here. And I think it was Jenna maybe that mentioned how you were filming shorter clips without dialogue. I haven't had to do it yet, but in my production class, we will be shooting these assignments called moments, which are, I think, maximum 1 minute. They have to be between 30 seconds to a minute, and it's all it is it's just showing, creating emotion by showing without using dialogue. So you're not allowed to use dialogue. It's short, and basically the goal is to create a change in the scene. So start off with something, there has to be a change, and you have to create emotion using aesthetics, using, by showing, not telling. And I think that's a cool assignment, which you could easily do, that you could do several times, that each time you do it, you can learn more about, okay, how can I fix this 30-second to 1 minute clip to create more emotion? The first day, this is side note, but just as far as showing, not telling, on my first day of class, I had a professor, obviously you can't do this on the first day of class because we've already started, but the first thing he said to us was, I want to hear some stories about your summer. And I was like, okay, this is really weird. Like, that's the first thing he said to us. And people were sharing some things. They're like, oh, I went to this place, or oh, I did this. And he let a few people share just like little one-liners. And he said, okay, but I want to hear a story. And then he kind of would build off of that each time. And someone would maybe share like a little more detail. And he'd be like, okay, but is that a story? Until he basically would let people go individually until they figured out what he wanted. And he would say, okay, so basically what I want you to show me, not tell me. And so then he had people try it, and he'd critique them and say, okay, but you just told me something. How do I know that when I transfer that onto the screen? And that's a simple exercise too, just to get people into the idea of showing, not telling. So yeah, those would be the two things I would just say. Story is everything, and showing, not telling.
Excellent. Wow, good ideas. Thank you. And Jenna.
All right, so I completely agree with Abby and Aaron. And also something that has been emphasized this year is like the fundamental idea of connection. So for example, in editing, my professor asked us, he went through like this series of, he asked us what we thought editing was. And we went through and we were like, oh, cutting up a scene to tell the story. And then he was like, why cut? And how do you cut? Like, what transition do you use? And then the whole thing, it comes back to you cut to support the story, but more specifically, you cut to create connection. So you cut from one character to another because that is a moment of connection you're trying to capture. You will choose a certain frame as opposed to another one, like you choose a close-up instead of a medium shot to create connection between the audience and the character. And one of the books that we're reading, one of the textbooks, is Crafting Short Screenplays That Connect by Claudia Hunter Johnson. And that's just about writing to create connection, because the goal ultimately is, if you make a film, the film is intended to connect with the viewer. And I think that focus on connection is super important. And it's something that I definitely always kind of knew, but I didn't put a ton of energy into that, other than just being like, oh, this is the demographic of the audience I'm trying to reach out to. But focusing on that and having that be a source of inspiration and like where your ideas are derived from, I think is really important. And can really shape your work. Like my editing has completely changed in the past month just due to the fact that I cut to connect. I no longer cut because it seems like a good time to cut, if that makes sense, or cut because it seems like that would propel the story forward. Yes, it does, but it should also connect, or it should show a lack of connection, but it should all come back to that.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Lots of good ideas that we can process here. What I'd like to do real quick is to establish a time when you're going to be home, if you're open to it, to come to a meeting here. We throw a potluck and invite you to come eat some food and talk shop. And so we just need to know, are you going to be in Olympia in December?
I will be in town. I come home pretty much every semester break I have. I'll be home in September, and then I'll be home in December again. So really, whatever works for you guys, I'll do my best to be there.
Okay. Well, when do you come here?
I come back. I'll have to double check on the December break. I have a September one coming up in about a week when I'll be back in town. But December, it's generally the same winter break as most colleges are on. So leading up to Christmas time, I'll be back for around a week-ish before then.
Okay.
But yeah.
And we're just looking at our calendar real quick. When in December do we?
We'll do Saturday the 22nd.
Saturday the 22nd.
Saturday the 22nd.
Saturday
Gotcha.
the 22nd. And Abby, do you know when your break is?
I'm pretty sure I get off on the 16th of December. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that's when I fly home. So
That's what I think.
yeah, I'm here. I'm here for most of December.
Okay. And Jenna?
I will most likely be flying home on December 16th, but there's a chance it might be a little later than that. But most likely December 16th, and then I'll be there through like January 4th or so.
Okay. So if we tentatively target the 22nd, see if that works for you.
Yeah, sounds good.
What time of day on the 22nd? Just
either lunch or dinner. Yeah, lunch.
lunch?
Day.
Okay, lunch. Noon?
Noon.
Noon on the 22nd. We'll
12:15.
12:15. The screenwriter here says 12:15, but like 12 to 1.
Gotcha.
22nd, 12.
And
Perfect.
you don't have to bring any food. We'll feed you.
Okay.
I don't know. Are those oranges in the background at Azusa Pacific? Are those orange trees? No, they're not orange trees. Okay, never mind.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
No, they're just some bushes.
What color?
But there are oranges around there. You could bring back oranges.
She's at which college?
And Abby, you're at Azusa. Now, is that a Christian college? Or is it
Yeah.
a film college? So is it Christian film college, or is it they do a lot of different things?
It's just a Christian university, and I'm in their cinematic arts department.
Got it. Okay. And Aaron, since we're doing this, what your school is? You want to just explain to the?
Yeah, I go to the New York Film Academy, but they say the New York Film Academy of Los Angeles, but it's actually in Burbank, so it's just confusing. But they have two campuses. One is in New York, one is in Burbank, and then a bunch of remote satellite campuses in like Shanghai and that kind of thing. But big international school. We're right next door to the main building for Warner Brothers, and we work out of the Burbank studios for editing, which Warner uses a lot for their editing and stuff. So they get you really like in the thick of it, which is nice. And it's like I believe a 3-year accelerated program for BFA. But yeah, it's great. It's a for-profit school, so that comes with caveats as always. But I love it. So
Excellent. And Jenna, what?
I go to University of North Carolina School of the Arts. It's also a BFA program, and it's only an art school, so there's no sports or anything. There are 5 schools: the School of Dance, the School of Music, the School of Film, School of Drama, and then Design and Production, which is technical theater. And basically there's each year about 400 students that come in, and they're divided up among those programs. Like there's only 8 drama kids my year, just because They only let in a certain number for each school, and you go through. There's also a grad program, but it's a very intensive program. So I'm taking 7 film classes, I believe, this semester, and 1 liberal arts class, and that's standard for film students. They don't recommend you take more than 1 liberal arts class per semester. That's all you're required to take, really. And you crew on films almost every other weekend, and yeah, it's a very intensive program.
Wow. Excellent. Well, unless there's questions from our crew here, I wanted to say thank you, and we'll be in touch. I think the next time we would get together, potentially, to throw out there is before the winter break, is if we have a focus question or questions about what we covered tonight. Problem solving, things that we put into our classrooms, and we're trying things out, and students are having questions. We might come back to you and say, how would you solve this, or what do you recommend? How would you steer us for this particular element? So stay tuned. We may request this again at some point sooner than later. But any questions, comments from us? Hey, and Jay says good luck. Eric says good luck. And
Don't you have the hurricane bearing down?
yeah, Jenna, don't you have like bad weather coming at you?
Yeah, there's a hurricane on its way. The school might get shut down. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm sure it'll be fine.
All right, well, good luck. Thank you all, and we appreciate it, and we will see you sooner than later.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night.